It's always something new with these guys. Just when you think you figured out that they eat animals and move on, you then find out they're probably just an eradication force of bioengineered monsters sent to soften up a planet's defenses, or at least that's my headcanon on it. In the events of A Quiet Place Day 1, it is in fact a place that has become quite quiet, as it's a Day 1 scenario. As the meteorite breaks up over the northern hemisphere of Earth, contaminating quite a few continents along the way with an invasive form of life that is exceedingly difficult to destroy, basically space herpes, we follow one woman who's attempting to just get some pizza before the cancer that she has takes her out. From what we see, however, we have to seriously ask, is this a random event or a targeted response? Let's discuss that in today's episode. But first, this episode is sponsored by Factor. If you've watched this channel for long enough, then you know I've lost like 30 pounds with Factor. With their fresh, never frozen, delicious meals, coupled with the fact that I could do the double protein route and still remain in a calorie deficit, this allowed me to build muscle and strength and lose fat, which, if you don't know, is incredibly difficult to do, but Factor made it that much easier. Double protein not your thing? With their 60 add-ons like breakfast, on-the-go lunch, snacks, and beverages, keto, calorie smart, vegetarian, and vegan, there really is something for everyone. I also like to do the protein shake option, as sometimes I just want to grab a pre-made bottle of protein and just snack on that, and that way I also know I'm getting an adequate amount of protein out of my meal. So if you want to enter your winter arc, as the youth say, then by going to factor75.com or clicking the link below and using code 50 Roanoke, you'll get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. That's 50 Roanoke at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. But as always, before we begin, I want to thank you guys for watching. I was thinking that if we can get this video to like 40,000 likes, we can kind of do like a game night, which will help me determine if y'all want to do that also in the future. So make sure to like this so that, I don't know, I can randomly pick people from the comments section who say game night, and then I'll respond and then write down your name. Basically, I'm trying to engage more with everyone. Anyhow, so apart from that, check out the gaming channel Roanoke Games, and then come join me on Discord where we watch movies that end up monthly on here. So as we begin this movie, what can I say about these creatures that already hasn't been said about the Alien franchise? It's bombed out and depleted. That said, I got a few requests to cover at least a few aspects of this movie that might seem to indicate something else is going on apart from just it being, you know, a complete chaotic random event. So view this video as a collection of theories as to what's happening. If you want their biology discussed in greater detail, I have covered the first two movies and I kind of go over that extensively, so I will link them in the cards later. We kick off our story with my arch nemesis Paramount having made this movie. Every single Quiet Place video I've ever had has gotten copyright hit, and every single one I have to fight over it, so I expect this won't be any different. I always did enjoy a good fight. Get your views in while they're hot. And I don't know, the 10th of the penny is not going to Paramount. As we fly over New York, you'll never find a hive of more villainy and scum. Also, the pizza is mid. Do you believe yourself to be the papa of pizza, perhaps? Maybe the dominoes one day will fall into place, but not today. Man, these puns are really lame. So we see that it emits around 90 decibels constantly, or a person screaming the entire time. Could not be me living out there. I need quiet. When I used to be a scientist in Atlanta, the one thing, having grown up outside of the city in Georgia, was that it was quiet. Even Atlanta had an ambient noise, and it drove me absolutely crazy. It's probably why I started YouTube. So she has a Dr. Mambo though, so at least there's that. We meet a support group where one woman is reading her poem about how this place is complete crap. Everyone needs a Dr. Mambo, just saying. Also, my professional opinion, go adopt one today. The people there are waiting to take the big nap, as hospice is the name of the game. Walking out, she is asked about her pain. He says they're gonna go to a show and that she should come. She mentions how last time was the last time and she wants to go get pizza in the city. Ah, New Yorkers. Like, something's up with their pizzas. You got like a pizza shop on 9th and then 10th. It's the same type of pizza, but somehow actually the pizza on 42nd is way better than the pizza on 39th, but still less than the pizza on 9th and 10th. Everyone truly believes out there that they can out-pizza the Hut. You fools. It's not possible. If you even try, it could kick off an apocalyptic event. It's right, you thought we were done with the pizza puns. Now we're done. So she agrees as she goes to head to her room, telling Dr. Mambo that he's getting fat. He's not fat, his primordial pouch just hangs low. She then takes off her medicine patch and puts on a new one. Cancer is actually legitimately such a biological punk. Like, if you don't want to play for the home team, leave. She then takes a bus and then passes a massive graveyard. Actually, if you've ever been to LaGrange, Georgia, it kind of looks like that. Heading into the city, the jets then fly overhead, showing that human domination is pretty much assured over the area. But for how long? Approaching the theater, it's a marionette show. No thanks. Sitting down, the show begins. The man then waves the puppet around as then the balloon it's flying on pops, representing flying high until eventually you're brought back down to earth, usually at the height of your pride. Remember that. It's like you never know when that lesson is going to hit just right in the future. Also, why are people gasping at the puppet? Samira then heads outside to walk down to the corner store as the manager of the store is on the counter. The hired help then says that they can't have a cat in here. Isn't that up to the furry manager to decide, brother? Heading back to the theater, Ruben is on the phone as he gets a call that everyone and himself needs to go back to the hospice care area immediately. Helicopters begin moving overhead rapidly as Samira then keeps talking about pizza. It turns into a quasi-argument, which, I mean, look, she's pretty sure she's going to check out soon, so she's just trying to relive the past a little, I guess you could say. So it really isn't about the pizza. Like, I get it. Well, actually, I don't. I mean, I imagine one day I'll get it, but today I don't get it. So Samira then gets on the bus after telling Ruben that he's not her friend, he's a nurse. And that's pretty brutal. Like, can he not be both? So as we take off, sirens begin going off as she can't hear any of this because she's listening to music. It's almost as if her earbuds are noise canceling, which is the perfect time to bring up today's episode sponsored by Ray. Everyone gathers in the back as meteorites begin landing, and they're called meteorites because they're the right stuff to make it to the ground. One then strikes really close by, blowing out all the windows as there's explosions all around her. As people move through the dust and smoke, they start getting grabbed if they make any noise by something completely unseen. National Guard then tells Samira to take cover as she's pulled up and you can see something standing behind her in the ash. Samira then runs off, getting blasted back by an ambulance, getting totally speared as it explodes. Not really sure why it exploded, but hey, who cares? Waking up in the theater, she was dragged back in as a man puts his hand over her mouth, telling her to be quiet. This is a quiet place. It's officially day one. Looking around, a ton of people sought shelter in there, and they are trying to be quiet. No shot that I would stay in there myself. Too many chances for noises to be made, as those things are everywhere. Everyone is having a nice cry over what they just witnessed, probably having lost people in the process, as Ruben sees Samira and then hugs her. Friend status officially achieved, brother. He then hands her Dr. Mambo as helicopters overhead tell everyone to shelter in place and that the creatures are deadly. You don't say. As they fly by, the creatures then run across the building tops, shaking the whole place, scaring Dr. Mambo out of Samira's arms. Chasing the cat, she then steps on glass, alerting the creatures that they are in the lobby. Dr. Mambo then hits a bell as it alerts the creature further in that they are just straight up sitting there. Smacking one body on the ground near Ruben, it squares up and then starts poking it with its weird mandible face thing. It's like a giant crab, which brings us to our first conspiracy theory. These things don't appear to be eating humans. Think back to like the several movies at this point. Have you actually ever seen any indication that my voice just cracked for some reason? Anyways, have you seen any indication that these things are actually like snacking on any of the humans that they, get? I mean, go back to the first one when that raccoon gets smashed, right? It just kind of gets dragged off. And then the other guy who kind of yells, it just kind of smacks him and then leaves. And I mean, even the one that's getting poked by its face mandibles, what it appears to be doing is just looking for biomass. But the question is, why? Well, we will discuss that in a moment, and all I'm saying is every single instance where we could possibly see these creatures consuming what they catch, it is never done. This complexity in the food web they appear to create indicates that something else may be happening. Farming is a fairly complex task for any animal, with arguably humanity being the masters of it at this current point in time. Of course, that depends on who you're asking, because the reality is in a lot of areas where we farm, the topsoils have been so entirely depleted, we are heavily reliant on fertilizers to the point that it could become a problem. We're not really sure. You can think back to the farming practices that created the Dust Bowl, for instance. Of course, it's important to understand that nutrients do not just disappear. We are simply moving them to other areas of the planet whenever any country exports food to another. Like, if you see that map of how much fertilizer, we'll call it, is in the Indian Ocean, we are definitely fertilizing the oceans, but we will likely need to figure that out before our farming capacity decreases. Anyhow, we see it in some species, such as the leafcutter ants, who cultivate fungus on harvested leaves, that they do prefer to eat this fungus. The same can be said for termites, who grow fungi on, chewed up plant material, or the damselfish, who tend algal gardens on coral reefs. But the point is, while humanity has a stranglehold on what it means to farm, other animals actually do engage in this practice as well, just to a smaller degree. But assuming that the Death Angels are utilizing a farming technique, if they truly are not eating any species on the planet, does this make this sort of a targeted event, or does this mean this is just a naturally occurring, event to them? Well, we'll discuss that a little later on. So a helicopter goes by again, alerting the creatures as they all take off to follow that. Heading to the bathroom to wipe off the ash from the meteorite impact. Her pain patch at this point is pretty much completely used up, meaning she's got to raw dog the pain now. That sucks. Walking into a makeshift radio room, she then touches one woman's arm as she sees the evacuation route. Looking at the globe, a ton of cities in the US have already apparently been hit and are currently besieged, which also means likely pretty much everything on this side of the rock has also been hit. Hearing a loud boom, the military is then destroying Manhattan bridges, or the bridges. I don't really know. I don't know enough about New York to really call them what they actually are. But basically, the creatures cannot swim, as we all know, and as a result, keeping them trapped on the island is evidently the move. But, okay, I question then, if several cities all over already have the creatures there and they're landlocked, is it really necessary to destroy the bridges? These things, judging by, the breaking up the meteorite prior to impact, would still have these things on the other side of the bridge, and you're not exactly stacking Death Angel bodies from what we have seen. So it seems like sort of a way to screw over anyone who's stuck on that island, right? I mean, suppose, possibly maybe sealing it off is better than not sealing it off if you're on the island, but it seems sort of like a moot point. Of course, if you do seal it off and you do somehow figure out how to take out these creatures, then you do create a safe area because they can't access it. I mean, I don't know. Seems like a bad idea in general. But witnessing it, one man has an absolute breakdown over this, like, bro, shut up. You know they hunt by sound. Like, the dad over here is like, dude, be quiet. So he looks over at his son and realizes this guy is not shutting up. So he's like, all right. So he smashes the dude's head into the wall, telling him to be quiet. And this apparently takes him out. Well, man, you pretty much did exactly what you needed to. I mean, that guy was an absolute liability to have around. Also, one head smash took him out. I mean, it can happen in real life, but we typically just attribute that to, bad luck. It's important to know, if you're in a bar fight, one punch can change everything. Best to avoid them entirely if at all possible. Of course, there's the old adage, your opinion stops at the end of my nose. So defending yourself, it's really more of their problem if it does happen to them. Obviously, you never throw the first punch or shove first. It's kind of like a good way to protect yourself. Anyways, so Samira now sits with Ruben and then tells him she's going to Harlem to get pizza. He then realizes that she's not joking, as she pretty much says that this is what she has to do. The power then shuts off, and for some god-awful reason, scientists are still trying to work this out to this day, why anyone's brain would operate in this manner. The generator turns back on, right? Well, Ruben runs outside to shut it off. Brother, just let the creatures take out the generator. They would do that, the sound would stop, and then they would move on. Like, they're probably already in this area anyhow, so it's not like you're getting them to go away. Like, I would not be going near that thing. He is not me, however, as then he, shuts it off successfully, but as he stands up, he rips his shirt and then he hears clicking as the creature jumps on him and pulls him off screen. Again, why did you need to shut it off? They would have just destroyed the generator and move on. You're an idiot. So Samira then sits looking at the last letter she wrote Ruben, as then she goes to sneak off. And I'm not really sure why she has to sneak. This is like that Rick and Morty episode where the dad is like leaving and he's like, you can't hold me, I'm getting out of here. And then the alien's like, all right, that was always allowed. Heading outside, well, those are some bloody cars. Grabbing a few provisions like Dr. Mambo's food as she heads back outside to walk to Harlem. Stopping in a park, she then opens the can of cat food as then she spots two younglings hiding behind the water. Heading in with her jacket somehow completely dry, she then hands them a snack bar, which they eat as they are quite hungry. A helicopter then flies overhead, telling everyone where they need to go. She heads back in, telling them to follow her and be quiet. As the creatures move through, though, they end up knocking a ton of stuff down onto the ground, including a fire escape, as one comes to check it out, concerned about what made that noise, which is kind of surprising, like, you dorks made the noise. It was you. So after it leaves, they emerge from the wreckage, as then they walk down the road with many others. Surely this won't turn into a giant crapshoot. Eventually, so many people show up that even the ambient walking noise starts getting too high. Clearly, they haven't played the Quiet Place game where you're an asthmatic pregnant woman and merely walking in a fire station gets you taken out. That was such an annoying part of that game. Go check out Roanoke Games if you want to see me rage quit. Samira then begins walking the other direction straight down the middle as someone has their rolling luggage. Like, dude, why would you bring that with you? Leave that at your house. So the creatures begin moving towards the march because they can hear everything as an attack begins as everyone begins screaming. Dr. Mambo gets lost in the chaos as Samira gets under a car. Okay, so right, this guy tries to crawl under as he grabs onto her yelling, help me, right? There's nothing happening to him. He's totally fine. But as he screams, he then gets pulled out because he was making so much noise. What was she supposed to... Dude, you would have been fine had you just shut up. So the car collapses on her legs, but she's able to get it free as in she runs into the alleyway. Also, I think based on the back end, that's a 4th gen Forerunner. The V8s, not bad, although they look kind of ugly. Also, one brainlet then screams, she's like in the middle, she's like, Jonathan, in the crossroads, which she immediately gets taken out, like nice going. I see now this invasion only works if it relies on grotesque levels of stupidity. New York! Anyways, having survived the chaos, Dr. Mambo then chases a mouse before approaching a flooded subway tunnel. If you notice, once again, people are dragged off, but nobody is really anywhere to be seen. These creatures are clearly doing a snatch and grab on people and carrying them off to some relatively horrific fate. But the question is, why? Which we will see actually here in a little bit, so I need to stop asking you why and probably just start explaining stuff. Now, this episode is basically hinged around like one scene, and I'm trying to explain it since I've covered these guys before. Hopefully you're still enjoying the ride. It is what it is. So one guy then emerges having almost drowned as he sees he's being observed by the meeting of the minds. Having a calming effect, if you've actually ever held a kitty, it does in fact calm you. And I need to do something with science, it's in my blood. A cat purrs at a range of 20 to 140 hertz, which interestingly is known to positively impact human physiology. This frequency can actually promote wound healing, as the frequency has been shown to cause an uptick in cellular mitosis levels. Along with this, if you hold several purring cats against your body, which might be a bit of a task, this can in turn cause endorphins to be released within your brain. You may be asking, why exactly? Well, much like a newborn's cry, essentially activating your almonds, making women typically feel kind of like a nurturing instinct and men to feel agitation, this is an evolutionary advantage. With women feeling like they need to grab a crying offspring and likely then they go to the aid, which in turn may help them identify a threat. With males feeling agitation upon spotting what the threat actually is, rage may follow, and with it a more aggressive defense. Frequencies have a major impact on the human mind. Another example may actually be the frequency that Earth produces. There's a hum emitted by the planet that every one of us feels and hears. We just don't register it, but on a physiological level and possibly psychological levels as well, we very likely do. It has been noted in astronauts, they will experience a downturn in stability of their moods as well as an increase in anxiety. Everyone always points out, well, maybe that's because they're in space. Listen here, dork, it's not because they're in space. Although, yes, probably they would feel anxiety at first. I mean, after a certain amount of time has passed, typically a person, though, will adapt to their environment. Space is no different. However, after getting outside of the Earth's hum, the aforementioned issues tend to increase, which is quite interesting. Now, what does this have to do with cat purrs? Much like the frequencies may have a negative impact, like with the astronauts, or perceived negative but actually positive impacts, such as agitation from a newborn's cry, which is actually what horror movies use to make you feel uneasy, that like string effect. It's mimicking the frequency of a newborn's cry, so it's made to make you feel like on edge. Frequencies can be just good things, such as a cat's purr, elevating mood, decreasing stress hormones, and helping you feel calmer. Hence why everyone should adopt their own Dr. Mambo. So the good doctor then heads back to Samira as the guy follows it, finding her, not really knowing where to go. He sort of just elects to follow Samira. She tells him to kind of go away, but he's sort of lost, as we will find out, because he's not really from the United States. So as they walk, one woman cries, and then it begins raining, which creates just enough noise for them to talk. Samira asks what his name is, as he says he's Eric. She immediately tells him to go to South Street Seaport and stop following her. Of course, he has no idea where that is. That would be like telling me to go to South Street Seaport. I'm walking like 12 feet and then getting farmed. So realizing this dude is totally lost, they then head to what I assume is Samira's old apartment prior to the cancer diagnosis and being put in hospice. Mainly because Dr. Mambo knows where the door is. She then tells him to kick it down and he goes to do it when thunder hits, as then they're able to gain entry. Checking for more patches because she needs some medication, she appears to be completely out. Every muscle of her body is reported to be on fire according to her. Ouchies. Which means probably the cancer is either in her brain or it's somewhere near her spinal cord, so it's causing basically everything to report as a massive amount of pain. So Eric then says his parents are from Kent, UK, and that he just came here for law school. She tells him to get in the water and get out of the city and that she's just going for pizza. He says, well, let's go get pizza then. He asks questions about her family, stating that this really wasn't part of the plan for him. Yeah, I think residing in the digestive tract of an alien race indirectly, of course, wasn't on anybody's bingo card, to be honest with you. So he asks to go get pizza with her, as then he reads a poem about her cancer diagnosis. They both have a nice scream when it thunders, as Samira then wakes up the next morning. Just two people vibing out angrily during an alien invasion. The waking up was faked out though, as we see an alien, as then the city looks scarred up from these things just even moving around. So she packs up Dr. Mambo and then heads out of the apartment, stopping at a bookstore, leaving Eric behind. Deciding to read, nerd, Dr. Mambo then looks up, spotting Eric, which freaked out Samira for a second before she turned around and just saw it was him. He hands her poems that she's written as she finally relents and lets him go get pizza with her. Standing, however, the book then drops as then they go to run out of there. The creatures begin descending into the area. Running to a revolving door, they're able to get through, but the suitcase side then stops any more progress, so he has to like push the door open really hard, and then it finally drops, alerting the creatures that they're in there. So these things will literally respond to just any noise. When that book first fell, instead of running, why would you just not like pick up a rock or pick up another book and just frisbee that thing as far away from you as you possibly can and then slowly walk out of there? Like, I don't get the logic. Why would you run away? Anyways, so running away, the creatures are now in full hunt mode as they know they're there, as Eric then sets off a car alarm to get their attention as then they head into the subway. Sitting down, it is abandoned and there is blood, clearly showing these creatures have been in there. Moving through, they then approach the other side as one of the creatures crawls down. Moving as quickly as they can, luckily their hitbox is way smaller than the one in the game, otherwise they would be totally done. They then find one of the rails is flooded as they enter it. With the clicking resuming, it is clearly looking for them as they begin their move through. Looking up, one of the creatures has made its home inside of the roof as it's just sort of chilling out in there. Keeping the good doctor elevated, Eric then starts having a bit of a freak out as a new phobia has formed due to him almost drowning, which, I mean, I get it. So the creature begins hearing them as Samira tries to keep him calm. He lets out a noise though as he actually starts calming, as the creature begins crawling after them. Swimming away, the water begins taking them under, and then it becomes too low for the Death Angel to move in, and it cannot swim, so it immediately drowns like a complete idiot. Way to go, you putz. Emerging at an area that caved in, likely due to a direct hit from a meteorite, and then crawl out into a church, finding many people in there praying. Waking up in the church, this gal's apparently in some serious pain. She then throws up, as she's also looking a little gaunt. Eric then asks her what medication that she needs, as he will go make a grocery store run. Finding the military checkpoint completely destroyed. Again, no shot, a literal tank got messed up by these things. So here's the first example of why I believe this is like an intentional response as opposed to something that could just be considered, a chaotic normal event. The strength that these creatures possess and the claws that they have would show that they almost appear over-engineered. Now, take this with a grain of salt, so let's do a refresher on where these things may have come from, as this can help explain what they probably evolved with and what they are now. Given that they hunt by sound alone and have no eyesight, as well as their ability to echolocate, as seen in the game, which they can actually do more than just track you by the noise that you make, but by your very movement, because echolocation obviously uses sound waves that then bounce off, and if anything has changed in that point, like if you went from here to there and then the sound waves kind of confirm that, then they know, hey, that's a person. But these creatures were likely very troglodytic. Troglodytes are when a species exists exclusively underground and do not emerge to go to the surface. Now, typically this will produce a species that either has dark coloring or is possibly completely translucent in order to hide. This species, however, would most definitely be wall crawlers and ceiling clingers. We see in the subway tunnel that they will burrow into the concrete and then make a home for themselves. This is very likely what happened on their planet that they actually originate from. Their claws could be used to dig into the rock as well as cling to the rock as they hunt the subterranean tunnels of their world. This may also put them in a similar classification as sort of like ants on Earth. However, they are clearly much larger. Now, this is not to say that they have a queen, as clearly there is a more independent social structure at work here, but their bodies being covered in armoring and their farming techniques shows that they behave at least somewhat similar to possibly the ants on this world. However, the destroyed tank, that seems like something more. While a tank would make noise and these creatures would probably intend to attack it, the claws that they have seem over-engineered to be able to actually and legitimately be a threat to a solid chunk of metal like that. Metal that is several times harder than rock. A case could be made that maybe on their planet, they may have like more metal deposits, allowing their claws to be stronger and able to dig into metal. But then we have to like come around to their literal strength and mass. Able to spear a vehicle and then push it against a wall by running into it, and along with that, surviving this impact. According to Newtonian physics, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. Should a creature try to spear a tank, that force required to literally hit it and impart that much damage into a tank would damage the body of the creature. The tank is very unlikely to move, which would then kind of back blow all that force into the soft tissue of the Death Angel's body. And this would very likely kill the creature in the process. Along with this, take firing into this thing with a 50 caliber round. I mentioned this in my first episode, but even if the round is stopped by armor coating, you are not stopping the transfer of energy. It's the same thing as wearing a bulletproof vest. You could still get broken ribs just from the energy that is imparted from the round. So unless there is a massive open area on the other side of that coating, allowing for energy to not be transferred at all to the actual meat of the body, then the creature is going to experience a ballooning of the tissue on the other side as the energy is dispersed into the body. Now extrapolate that out to like a headshot, right? We have seen a pellet dispenser works just fine when their faces open up. So first you're telling me when these things listen, and we're likely listening to the soldiers over there with their heads open, nobody got a shot off? A 50 cal round never struck the center of their head, ballooning into the brain area? Like, no shot. I don't buy it. These creatures dealing with one human with like maybe small arms would likely survive the encounter. But with the military, with what we know about energy and what it can do to meat, even if like the actual physical bullet is blocked, these creatures are getting wrecked 10 out of 10 times. Under natural circumstances, that is. This is why I am starting to believe that this isn't actually the case and that they are formed under intentional circumstances. I believe these creatures did exist somewhere out there, but I also believe they may be the beginning of something worse. So let's take a look at how they got here. Two things need to happen simultaneously that cannot exist. First, the asteroid that entered the atmosphere, that they entered the atmosphere in, needed to be brittle enough that it would completely break apart before striking the Earth. And given its size that we can see, you're talking about something similar to like what wiped out the dinosaurs. Yet there was no flash, no explosion, no issues concerning like a fire wave or shock wave or anything. So really the main problem was just the creatures that exited out of it. However, this chunk of rock also needed to somehow be blasted off the surface of a planet, remain intact enough to have a sizable population of these creatures, transport them across an unknown distance, and then not destroy the planet it hit. That instability when entering the atmosphere, enough to have it break apart completely and actually not damage the planet, but the stability to remain together after some cataclysmic event ejected it off-world, I don't think that can exist at the same time. So what does this mean? Well, I believe these creatures existed on a world somewhere at some point. Something snatched up that original species, which is arguably going to be rather aggressive and a nuisance anyhow, and then engineered them to be worse. By placing them in a brittle asteroid and then chucking them at a planet at a low angle of approach, they can actually have these creatures seed a planet and then disrupt the native inhabitants of that world. As these creatures spread out, it would be sort of like a shock and awe campaign. If any alien race knew about humanity, they would also likely know that we had nuclear options at our disposal. However, with these creatures, we would just regard them as hyper-aggressive animals, and we would not resort to nukes, as it would be difficult to target any one particular spot to eradicate these things. However, if an alien force shows up and they were aggressive, we would definitely resort to nukes. So as a result, another species that wants a world could chuck like basically an asteroid of these things in a very brittle, hollow asteroid so that it breaks apart an atmosphere at a planet, then wait for the cleanup crew to do its work, and then inhabit the world later devoid of any large species, because everything is destroyed, not just humanity. The entire food web would be broken down due to this invasive species, and I believe what we are going to see shows that this is a timeline that has an expiration date by the simple fact of how these creatures operate and what they need to consume. Heading into the pharmacy, he then grabs a flashlight as he begins looking for the medication. The cat then jumps up, scaring the absolute holy hell out of him, and then he pets the good doctor. Walking along, the cat then runs up into a construction zone that looks like a lot of red iron is bent. The cat is then seen eating something as one of the creatures then jumps down. Moving through the area, the cat has moved up onto a beam. The alien then follows the hissing of the fungi, inhaling some of its spores. Eric then climbs up on the beam as the alien breaks the fungi apart, and then starts barking at the others, showing it has found food as everyone starts eating. Crawling across the beam, somehow Eric makes a noise. The creature then starts listening, which interestingly, it cannot hear your heartbeat that close, which is pretty good news, as then it moves under the beam and then walks off. So here we see why there is a limiting factor. These creatures are not true meat eaters, despite having evidently evolved sharp needle-like teeth. They are fungi eaters. These teeth, though, would indicate genetic tampering to create something that is able to bite and kill. However, their preferred food source is not meat. Along with this, a case could be made that the teeth are used for self-defense, but even then to that point, there's no way that these teeth are actually piercing another's armoring, so they could be used for hunting to possibly grow this fungus as it's doing now. Obviously, this fungus would kind of be a mediary substance, which may help them to be able to consume non-native populations. So one of the things that this could be doing, considering the cat also eats it, cats are known as obligate carnivores. Essentially, they need taurine and arginine. They don't produce enough of it on their own, and they can't get it from like plants, so they have to eat a lot of meat in order to get that. Obviously, this would possibly break down amino acids from basically a completely different type of species that may or may not have compatible amino acids, and then allow these creatures to eat. So maybe they work a lot like cats, where they need arginine and taurine. But apart from that, I think just like the teeth, much like with the claws, all this has been engineered to basically make this thing better at taking out a local population. But more to the point, this is a temporary arrangement. On their home planet, clearly a balance would need to be struck with a local population of life in order to grow this fungus. So either Earth is just easy mode for these creatures, which is always a possibility, or they were intentionally altered to engage in behavior that naturally occurs in them, hunt to grow fungus, but they're altered in a way that would allow them to basically eradicate all life on a planet. And then from here, once this process is complete and all life has been converted, the fungus would no longer have anything to break down, and unless it begins turning on like the local flora populations, this would then cause food stores to dwindle until ultimately the Death Angels would starve, leaving a planet devoid of anything except for plants and microorganisms. From here, a world like this would be fairly easy to take over, as there's really no resistance from a local population, and you're just kind of dealing with microorganisms, which likely have now returned to a natural set point, considering humans aren't really around, so antibiotic resistance has pretty much been eradicated. So grabbing Dr. Mambo, Eric then heads back to the church with the medication. Attaching it, now you gotta wait several hours for that to take effect. She looked like she's ready to basically check out, however, as she tells him about how they would go to this jazz club next to Patsy's. She then tells Eric how her old man died from the same thing that's taking her out, and that's totally a bummer. And he says she can't check out just yet until we go get pizza. So the next day, they hit up the Lost and Found, grabbing shoes as they head out, where we see kind of a sweet 1986 Jeep Wagoneer. These things, like, they're pretty average in terms of reliability. Like, don't get me wrong, they were no Toyota Hilux. Now it's Hilux or Helix. I don't really care how people pronounce it. I'm a Toyota purist. Other people are way too much of a Toyota purist. But all in all, the Wagoneers did offer a good mix of like power and off-road capabilities. I always feel like Jeep people are actually just a special breed of people. They know their vehicle isn't gonna last long. It's average off-road. It could throw a rod at any minute, yet they still stick with it. I mean, I'm not bashing. I still tout Toyota as like the end-all be-all, but the new Tundra engines are blowing out because they decided a turbo 6-cylinder was good enough. Look, brother, I got a 6-cylinder 3.4 liter. God bless it, I love my 2000 Tacoma, but she ain't winning any races or pulling the 67 Impala home. So why would you put that in a Tundra? Granted, that last part is a lie. Technically, I could pull the Impala home, but there would be issues. Regardless, Jeep, not even once. But the Wagoneer gets a pass. So heading to Patsy's, a semi has actually crashed into it, burning it down and destroying it. And that was the whole reason they came out here, and now that's gone. That is a spirit breaker. Heading to the flaming sewer hole for some reason, Eric then asks her where the jazz club is, because that's really all we can go to now, as then he hugs her. Heading into the Winchester, having a pint and waiting for all this to blow over, she then starts charging her iPod Nano, I think. I can't really remember what that is, as Eric then heads outside and does find some pizza. But hey, yo, it's pizza on 12th, so it's not real pizza. Oh, God. So he writes Patsy's on it, though, as she clearly thinks it tastes like crap. I mean, it's pizza. So Dr. Mambo also steals a piece, confirming it's good pizza. So drinking some bullet bourbon, I believe, Eric then grabs a stool and shows her his real calling was magic. This dude's a showman. Chugging some alcohol, and then pulls out her card, as then they go back to drinking heavily because it's the end of the world. Going out onto the fire escape, they then spot a boat as Samira then hands Eric the sweater that she's been wearing. Putting it on, the creatures are tracking the boat and not paying attention to them. Like, call out to these things and see if you can get them to jump in the water is my advice. Or at minimum, talk the biggest smack imaginable because they suck. So heading downstairs, their plan is to get to the water and then jump in, moving through the traffic jam of burnt out vehicles. If this is anything like the game, where they have to go through the fire station again, where they're gonna die like 47 times, instead of just using the boat that they already passed. Eric then starts having a freak out as Samira tells him to breathe. She gives Dr. Mambo to Eric and then tells him to run. Grabbing a tire iron, she then breaks some of the glass as she runs away with the creatures freaking out. The dad from earlier sees this and tells them to stop the boat. I'm Still Standing begins playing in my brain as Eric runs onto the dock with Dr. Mambo jumping into the water before these things could grab him because they were right on his tail, with him going into the water and they cannot continue giving chase. How the cat didn't freak out when it landed into the water is beyond me. Swimming to the boat, they then haul him up as Samira watches from the island. How she didn't get got either, considering she made all that noise, is nothing short of strange. Man, they should have just like stayed with the dad the whole time. This guy knew what was up. So back at Patsy's, she looks at a picture of her and her old man as Eric then snuggles the cat. Standard activity on a normal day. Eric then finds a note telling him to take care of her cat and not make him fat. Also, don't rub his belly. He doesn't like that either. Look, they don't want their bellies rubbed. Maybe they shouldn't have such soft bellies. You ever think about that? So as Samira then walks along, it appears some time has passed. She listens to music as she pulls the aux cord out of the radio as one of the creatures then arrives, hopefully not to play some trash music on the aux. It's an alien though, so it's probably gonna be nothing but gleeps and glorps. But thus concludes A Quiet Place, Day 1. To me, this species was clearly sent here intentionally. As we get more information on them, the more interference seems to have been required for them to get off-world, and then somehow hit ours without some major cataclysmic event damaging the planet. It just doesn't seem possible. Of course, if the plan was to take out the world completely, I think they may have missed Australia, but the cassowaries will kind of take care of that. Also, there's gonna be an Australian who says, "That's not how you say cassowary." Listen, man, I'm not from Australia. But even still, the main point with humanity would likely have been just to weaken our defenses, have the military focused on dealing with these, and then displacement of populations and resources. I think if we get A Quiet Place Day 2, we will see the arrival of something else, which that statement makes no sense considering the first one takes place 3 months later, and then like 4 years later. I think that's the second one, right? Basically, these aliens are gonna show up. They're gonna need to show up soon. But anyhow, I want to thank you guys for watching. Do you think these things just randomly arrived on world somehow through a massive amount of luck? Or do you think they were intentionally sent here? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed, then leave a like. It's always appreciated. This gets the video out there. And subscribing lets you know occasionally when I post. I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, Roanoke Games, and Roanoke Tales channel links in the description. But speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. First, massive thank you to our lone astronaut, Tristan Kessick. Thank you, my man. I do appreciate it. Next, I'd like to thank our astrophysicist, Death Dancer, and Feather. Thank you guys as well. And to my scientists, Eris, Dakota23, Invictus Echo, Lucian Dragon, Metric System, Official Texan, and Gurx Hellstrom. You guys are ballers. And then to the rest of my patrons, I do appreciate y'all's support. It goes a long way towards keeping everything smoothly running around here. So again, it's greatly appreciated. I'm also about to revamp the Patreon tiers to give y'all something back, depending on your tier for like the support I've gotten. So keep an eye out for that. But all right, that's going to do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I will see y'all in the next one.